One leaked document, 12 pages, and tonight it's tearing the heart out of the British government. At 4:30 p.m, a confidential constitutional memo written personally by Prince William was leaked to the Beak. Within minutes, chaos erupted inside number 10 Downing Street. Phones rang non-stop. Aides sprinted between offices. Legal teams locked themselves behind closed doors. And one single word echoed through the corridors of power. Oh, catastrophic. What was inside this memo is not gossip, not rumour, not speculation. It's an official accusation that could end Keir Starmer's career and shake the foundations of the United Kingdom itself. When the document landed on the Prime Minister's desk 2 days ago, panic was immediate. Keir Starmer reportedly read the first 3 pages in silence before calling an emergency 90-minute meeting with his closest advisors. But instead of addressing Prince William's accusations, their first move was something else entirely. To bury it. Within hours, Downing Street's legal team began exploring how to silence the media. They discussed invoking national security laws to stop journalists from publishing even a single line. Think about that. The government's first instinct when confronted by the future king wasn't to respond, but to censor. And it didn't stop there. A directive quietly circulated from the Cabinet Office warning civil servants that discussing the memo, even privately, could violate the Official Secrets Act. Translation, talk about this and your career is over. One senior insider in Whitehall described the mood as pure terror because this wasn't a polite complaint from a royal. This was an indictment written in cold, precise legal language that government lawyers themselves reportedly called unanswerable. According to one number 10 source, the team badly misjudged William. We thought he was ceremonial, they said. We were wrong. He's a constitutional heavyweight, and now that the leak has gone public, the 5 bombshell charges inside the memo are being exposed, one by one. The first charge, found on page 3, accuses Starmer of unlawful usurpation of royal prerogative. In simple terms, William is saying that the government has tried to steal powers that have belonged to the Crown for over 600 years, and that doing so is illegal. Starmer's new legislation would strip the monarchy of crucial constitutional powers, like appointing ministers and giving formal consent to laws. Starmer's team insists those powers are just ceremonial, but William disagrees strongly. He argues that those powers exist for one purpose, to act as the final check against government overreach. Remove them, and you remove the last safeguard against tyranny. To back his case, William's memo cites legal precedents going back to 1611, proving Parliament cannot simply vote to give itself powers that belong to the Crown. That's not democracy, the memo reads. That's a constitutional coup. Experts are backing him. Professor Alistair Finch from Oxford, a man who's advised 2 former prime ministers, called William's argument constitutional dynamite. In an interview with the BBC, Finch warned, the government is trying to build a house with no foundations. This represents the most dangerous executive overreach since the 17th century. Even members of the King's own council who reviewed the memo were stunned. One remarked, the Prime Minister seems to think he's the head of a republic. He's not. He's the King's first minister. In that single line, the true weight of this crisis becomes clear. Prince William has just reminded the government of a fact they seem to have forgotten. The monarchy is not a formality. It is the cornerstone of the British Constitution. But that was just the beginning. The second charge, laid out on page 5, accuses Starmer's government of reckless disregard for the Commonwealth. King Charles isn't just King of the United Kingdom. He's head of state for 14 other nations, including Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Yet Starmer's proposed legislation would fundamentally alter the Crown's constitutional role without consulting a single one of those countries. Prince William's memo poses one devastating question. Did the Prime Minister consult the other realms before trying to change the nature of the Crown they all share? The answer, according to leaked diplomatic communications, is no. Not once. The Australian High Commission described Starmer's move as constitutionally reckless and deeply disrespectful. A senior Canadian diplomat went even further. We share a head of state. You cannot change the rules without even making a phone call. This isn't how allies behave. What began as a domestic constitutional crisis was suddenly becoming a diplomatic disaster. But then came something even more alarming. A leaked WhatsApp message from a radical Labour backbench group, reportedly sent just hours after the memo broke. It read, "If the Commonwealth realms are upset, good, it's time they grew up and became republics." That single message exposed what many are now calling the true agenda. This isn't about modernisation, it's about dismantling the Commonwealth itself. And according to the memo, William saw it coming. By now, panic had turned to desperation inside Number 10. Multiple insiders described frantic efforts to draft counter-arguments, but government lawyers found themselves cornered. "There's no way to argue against it," said one source. Every page of that memo is legally watertight. What Prince William had done wasn't just challenge policy. He had redefined the debate about Britain's constitutional balance of power. And the most chilling part, the memo's third charge took the crisis to an entirely new level, from political to terrifying. The third charge in Prince William's leaked memo is where this story turns from political tension to outright alarm. On page 7, William accuses the government of corrupting the civil service, the very institution meant to protect the Constitution from political abuse. According to sources who have seen the memo, senior civil servants privately warned that Starmer's legislation may be unconstitutional, but instead of listening, Number 10 allegedly pressured them to provide legal justification anyway. That demand, William argues, violates their oath, because their loyalty is sworn to the Crown, not to any political party. But buried deep within the memo lies something darker. A revelation that shocked even seasoned constitutional experts. William exposes a hidden clause in Starmer's draft legislation that would grant the Prime Minister sweeping authority to discipline or reassign any senior civil servant who obstructs the government's legislative agenda. In other words, if you disagree, you're gone. William labels this the Purge Clause. It's a legal weapon disguised as reform, designed to silence the very people meant to hold the government accountable. The government knew their plan was unconstitutional, the memo reads. So instead of changing it, they built a system to punish anyone who points it out. That line has since been quoted by nearly every major political analyst in the country. A senior former judge called it executive overreach at its most dangerous. And Prince William, by exposing it, just set off the constitutional equivalent of a bomb inside Westminster. But the shockwaves didn't end there. The fourth charge, found on page 9, accuses Keir Starmer of public mandate deceit. William's team reportedly combed through Labour's entire election manifesto, line by line, and what they discovered stunned everyone. Nowhere, not once, did Starmer ask voters for permission to rewrite the British Constitution. His campaign promised stability, reform and integrity. Yet behind closed doors, his team was crafting legislation that would radically transform the balance of power between Parliament and the Crown without any public consent. Prince William's memo calls this out directly. The government has no democratic mandate for constitutional revolution. He's not just challenging Starmer's policy, but he's questioning his right to govern. That accusation has already begun to split the Labour Party. According to leaks from within, 12 Labour MPs have privately expressed doubts about the reforms. Some are now calling for the Prime Minister to pause and review the legislation. The public reaction, meanwhile, has been explosive. A YouGov poll taken within 12 hours of the memo's leak shows Starmer's approval rating collapsing by 15 points. When asked whether the Prime Minister has a mandate to make these constitutional changes, 78% of British adults said no. A petition opposing the reforms has gone viral, growing from 460,000 signatures to over 1.2 million in just 2 days. For the first time since his election, Keir Starmer faces open rebellion, and not just from his opponents, but from within his own ranks. But the final charge, the one on page 11, is the most serious of all. In it, Prince William warns that Starmer's actions pose an imminent threat to the unity of the United Kingdom. His reasoning is brutally clear. The Crown, he argues, is the single thread that binds the four nations, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, into one kingdom. Attack the Crown and you unravel that thread. Starmer's proposed constitutional reforms, William says, would politicise and weaken the monarchy, giving new fuel to separatist movements in Scotland and Wales. Undermine the crown, the memo warns, and you hand secessionists their strongest argument, yeah? In simple words, if the monarchy loses its neutrality, the very foundation of the United Kingdom begins to crack. A senior Conservative MP who read the leaked document called it the most brilliant constitutional counterstrike in living memory. Another said, William has trapped him. Starmer must now choose between his radical backbenchers and the survival of the United Kingdom. He cannot have both tonight. Britain finds itself standing at the edge of a constitutional cliff. Keir Starmer is boxed in. If he ignores William's memo, he risks looking authoritarian, a prime minister who dismisses a legitimate challenge from the heir to the throne. But if he backs down even slightly, he'll appear weak to his own party, a leader forced to retreat under royal pressure. Either move could destroy him politically. Prince William, on the other hand, has played his hand with surgical precision. He has not positioned himself as a political actor, but as a guardian of the Constitution, of the Commonwealth, and of the very idea of British unity. His stance has drawn massive public support. Social media is flooded with messages backing him. Radio call-ins and television debates are dominated by one question: was Prince William right to act? For many, this is no longer about politics. It's about principle, about whether the rules that hold Britain together can survive a government that appears determined to bend them. This confrontation between the monarchy and Parliament is unlike anything seen in modern times. It's not just a dispute over power, it's a struggle over identity, loyalty, and the very soul of the nation. And the question now facing Britain is deeper than ever before. What kind of country will it become when this storm finally ends? Will it remain a nation anchored in centuries of constitutional balance, or will ambition and ideology reshape it beyond recognition? Because one thing is clear. This story is far from over. The next days could determine not only Keir Starmer's future, but the destiny of the monarchy itself. And as the crisis unfolds, every move, every statement, and every silence will define the legacy of both men, the Prime Minister who tried to change Britain and the future King who refused to let him.